Joining me is Greg Clark, Group Advisor, Future Cities and New Industries at HSBC, Karuna Gopal, the President of the Foundation for Futuristic Cities, and Sunil Mathur, the Managing Director and CEO of CitiesIndia. Karuna, let's begin with you. Firstly, what are some examples of the relevant smart or technology data-enabled urban projects or infrastructure that have been deployed in India so far, and what have the results been?
Ben, thank you for asking me the first question, but let me just share with you what is the time that we're going through. India is now experiencing an amazing time. I mean, there's been a shift in our perception in terms of what is important for the country. And to have this discussion at this point in time is perhaps really, really important for the country to share the message with the world also. We have now a perfect grip on our priorities in three areas. One is in the area of cities, the others in the area of technology. The third one is about citizens, people living in the cities. Now, if I have to take you back a little, I remember in 2005, earlier Prime Minister declared a city rejuvenation program back in 2005. And most of the reports would say something like India's cities are the economic engines of growth, they're hubs of innovation. But pretty much at that time, everything was confined to the papers. There was absolutely no conviction that Indian cities would really lead development at all. But when the new government started in 2014 under the stewardship of Narendra Modi, we realized that there is an urban advantage and there is a distinct shift towards looking at cities favorably because they might really contribute to the economy. Now, with COVID, there is absolute conviction that cities are very important for India, and we might have to look at how to really nurture those cities. Just to now explain a bit more. Around the world during COVID times, you realize that the word repurpose was used quite often. Drugs were repurposed. For instance, you had drugs for epilepsy that was repurposed to treat COVID. We had even drug that was used to treat animals. Ivermectin was repurposed to treat COVID patients. Likewise, in India, there was an interesting phenomenon of repurposing institutions. Our higher educational institution like IIT repurposed itself and started actually becoming a maker space where it started making test kits and coming out with PPE kits, etc. Now, that was happening in cities. These higher educational institutions were available in cities. And then it was not only repurposing of institutions, but also of people. Some of the doctors who realized that ventilators and respirators were really not needed, but a hybrid machine was needed. Some of the doctors repurposed themselves, became manufacturers, and they came out with that. The most important thing that we need to know now is what's happening in cities. Now, we, as a part of 100 Smart Cities mission, established, now coming to your question, we established command and control centers. These have been the most important infrastructure investments that we have made in 100 Smart Cities. They manage the critical infrastructure of the city. They look at processing real-time data coming from different utilities, plugging water leakage, understanding, controlling traffic. And this is perhaps some of the best investments we made in terms of our technology deployment. And we have several data scientists who are working in those centers. But the beauty of COVID time is that all these command and control centers that were tech heavy, knowledge heavy with a bunch of data scientists working were repurposed to become COVID war rooms. We started tracing and contact tracing. We started understanding how to monitor lockdown. Everything, practically the supply chain of medicines, everything was monitored through these investments that we made for control and command centers. So now categorically we know that cities are extremely important, and you would also know that our Prime Minister recently announced a national infrastructure pipeline with a whopping investment of 100 lakh crores, like several thousand billions of US dollars would be put in this. The backdrop is again cities. So today we are very clear that cities are very important, and therefore there used to be a little bit of a tussle earlier that India lives in its villages, and do we have to really take a look at cities? But now, with absolutely no doubt, sans doubt, as they say in French, we have to now start looking at cities as drivers of growth for the country. The second important thing that at this point that happened is about technology. We used to have lurking doubts about whether technology is really useful for the country because we have our traditional ways of working. But after COVID, we realized that one is the example that I've given in terms of your command and control centers that is completely tech heavy, that manage the entire COVID situation. But work from home was driven by technology. So today people just don't have any kind of a doubt whether we need to go for, earlier we used to have a lot of discussions on driverless cars or driveless cars. You know, there used to be a lot of fighting between tech evangelists and the sustainability experts in terms of deployment of either technology or decisions on transportation modes. But now we are very certain that technology is important. And third one that I'd like to emphasize at this point, India is now very clear that people are very important. People living in a city are important, because earlier we thought that we could have a master plan. We could plan a city like a pancake or a pyramid or perhaps a donut. But none of these things work because our cities have evolved primarily because of the entrepreneurship and the enterprise, the spirit of a private individual. Look at any city, the kind of development it has seen is because the people wanted to really start making it vibrant. So now we are very clear that even in COVID, we survived because of the compliance of people. They masked up, they maintained social distancing, and they washed their hands. So people are very important. So we're going to perhaps start looking at things in a very different way, take cities as prime movers for our economic development, look at technology very seriously, now not question the relevance and importance of technology. Third one is a people-driven change. We're not going to look at people as, passive objects. We're not going to just announce those master plans without engaging with citizens, because ultimately they contour or they shape cities. This is the new understanding we have, and we're very happy with this new understanding of cities.
Great. Well, thank you. Interesting. Thank you. So, Karuna, let's come to you. What are your thoughts on that, particularly in terms of some of the deficits around the lack in practice, I suppose, of an urbanization plan and governance weaknesses in cities and so on. And that brings me to the question of what kind of reforms, if any, are needed, whether these are big bang reforms or more kind of incremental capacity building, skilling at a local level. What's your view?
Well, I really agree with what Greg mentioned. To actually have a national plan for cities is really important, but our governance structure is such, we are a federal system, and it really becomes difficult to drive down change with a national plan. You need to have several states agree, fall in line with your vision, participate in an equal way. These are all big challenges that India has, unlike China, that can just get anything going with, top down. That's perhaps one of the biggest challenges we have. The second one is about the metropolitan governance. I know we have been working quite, hard at pulling all the institutions together because we have multiple institutions that have to deliver services, and they have to work together, sync up, and really understand how to talk to one another in terms of delivery and the metrics. That is, again, a big challenge because we've never been historically taught to cooperate. So at one time, I've even proposed to the government, let's have a training in Aikido, a certain kind of a martial art, where you collaborate, you act as if you're fighting, competing, but you are actually collaborating. So Indian institutions need that kind of let's say training in cooperation and collaboration. Now, a couple of important things that I'd like to say at this point, how we have to drive change in India. One is we need to really look at India-specific solutions, Indian city-specific solutions. Now, contextualization is very critical for us. I remember those days when we just said, let's go for transit-oriented development, let's get metro systems all over the country. And you remember, since you work in India, that Pune city protested against it because Pune did not need a metro at all. Maybe a light rail could do. So you need to really contextualize. And just because there's a technology available, like let me give a very gross example in terms of if you have in vitro fertilization or artificial insemination available with surrogacy opportunity, you wouldn't like to try it just because it's available, right? I mean, you will need it when you need it, you try it. So India, it's important to look at contextualization in terms of picking up those technologies that are readily available in the marketplace today. The second thing is about building institutional capacities. What I have realized is in India, we have enormous amount of talent. For instance, we have the third largest group of data scientists, who have not been put to good use in the government system. For instance, some of our women are 42% of the STEM graduates in India, science, technology, engineering, mathematics graduates are women. We have overtaken US, UK, Germany in producing women with those tech qualities, but they are nowhere to be seen in the government systems. We need to harness that kind of talent, bring them on board, let them work with our, the systems that we are implementing. Another important thing that I noticed, and it's a real painful thing, last 15 years I've been seeing that most of the municipal authorities don't seem to have an understanding on what is a vision for the city. How do you understand sectoral investments? How do you look at, how do you balance economy, ecology, and equity? These are three important elements in a city. Just because you are interested in economic development, you cannot compromise your ecological assets of a city. So there's a big gap. Now, our people have to be trained on sustainable development goals, make them understand how we reach each of those goals and what is it that they need to really, get things going. Another important thing is about data. I remember when we started our careers 20 years ago in the domain of urban, we were hunting for data that is authentic. We never had the system of capturing data, sanitizing that data. But today, data regime is quite popular in India. So we are hoping that we will move forward and start working and taking that very seriously. The last and the important thing I'd like to say in really infusing life into our cities is to capitalize on the gig economy. Our cities have what we call as the hybrid business ecosystem, where we have big companies, small companies, then we have startups, we have educational institutions, then we have a whole bunch of people who are working in the informal sector. If our cities can really bring them on, deploying any of these disruptive technologies, bring them on board and make them contribute to the city's economic development, and parallelly, you train them, teach them to protect our ecological assets, then look at technological deployment wherever required. Then we can have cities that are thriving, in terms of the three economic development, equity, and, ecological sustenance, let's say. So these are the things that have to be done in India, and quite in a very focused way. We can't be just looking at business as usual. Now, as I mentioned before, cities are important. Technology is important for us. We are looking at fund infusion, not only the private sector funding that is coming in a big way, but we need to understand how to work with the private sector in terms of drafting our public-private partnership agreements so that the private sector will not be left high and dry. They need to get their money in. The return on investment has to be seen, for which our policies have to look at user fee. how do we frame those policies? And look at pension funds. A whole bunch of pension funds are interested in coming to India to invest in our infrastructure that is sustainable. Now we need to attract them because they go away. Their takeaway is not return on investment in terms of money. Their interest is to see that we conform to our emission norms and develop in a very sensible way. So these are things that our cities have to do in a very big way.
Yeah, thank you. On that point, thank you. Yes, go ahead, Karuna. Let's. We have a few minutes left, so
yeah.
Go ahead.
Just to add to what Sunil was saying about the utopian condition of every institution, government institution, to come together and work. I'd like to just present to you how complex and complicated it is, in the sense that if you look at e-governance implementation in the past, the learning from e-governance implementation failures, not only in India, but in different parts of the world, is because e-governance that we thought was tech heavy was actually not so. In e-governance, the technology was just 20%, 35% was business process reengineering, 45% was transition management, which is to do with people. Bringing people on board, educating them about the value of deploying technologies is perhaps the biggest challenge that we have. So when we want to bring in all the institutions onto the same platform, sharing information, data seamlessly and presenting a wholesome picture to anyone who would like to use that would perhaps need concerted efforts in bringing these players, mostly these people who are manning those institutions, to work together and make the transition management an important, the keystone of change in the governance of cities.
Thank you.